You've waited weeks, maybe even months, and finally you see a literary agent's response pop up in your inbox. You probably feel a mix of excitement and nerves as you are opening that email to see if they have liked your query or not. If that response includes a request to read your full manuscript, then congratulations, that is incredible and is an amazing opportunity to potentially move forward with that agent. But the reality of the querying process is that most likely that agent has rejected your query. First, I want to reassure you again and again and again that rejections are just a completely normal and integral part of the traditional publishing process. You should not feel bad to get a rejection of any kind from any agent, because at the end of the day, finding an agent really is like dating, and you are simply not going to be that perfect match for everyone. And again, like dating, it really only takes one agent to connect with. So I wanted to preface this video by reassuring you that if you are getting rejections, it is normal, it is part of the process, and today I want to help you decipher another level of what these different rejections might look like and what they might mean. If you receive a rejection, you probably find yourself scouring over every word and phrase that the agent uses, trying to decipher why they didn't respond positively to your query and potentially what their thought process was in rejecting it. How can you tell if they even read your sample pages? Or maybe it was the pitch that threw them off. You might be wondering if you need to tweak anything about your query letter or about your sample pages in order to get the next agent's interest. And these are all valid questions to have. Responses from literary agents can be vague and downright confusing. And as someone who used to work at a literary agency and managed many of the responses to queries, I know firsthand where they are coming from. And so today I'm going to try to demystify some of the common phrasing that you will see in rejection emails so that you can identify what we call a form rejection from a personalized rejection that is actually giving you constructive feedback that you should keep in mind. If you are at all interested in the book publishing industry, if you are in the process of trying to get your book published, or if you are currently writing your manuscript draft, I recommend subscribing to my channel. Every week, I either talk about the industry, like in this video, or I give tactical tips on how to improve your story. And with that in mind, in the description below, I also have a link to download my free story self-assessment. That is a worksheet that I created specifically with aspiring authors in mind. I know how hard it can be to identify what you're doing well and what needs to be improved in your story draft, and that worksheet helps you do just that. It's also going to sign you up for my newsletter that I'm so excited to launch soon with exclusive tips and resources. So before I get into the specific examples of agent responses that I'm going to interpret and translate with you today, we need to talk about the difference between a form rejection and a personalized rejection from a literary agent. A form rejection means that this is just the standard rejection language, almost like a templatized email that the agent will send if they have decided not to move forward with that query. And I know it sucks, but the reason that they have to use form rejections is just because at any given time, agents have hundreds, if not more than 1,000 queries unread in their inbox. And to get through them in any matter of time, sometimes they just have to use that form rejection because they can't really sit down and take the time to write everyone an individual note. That's why they have some standard phrasing that they will turn to, and I'm going to help you identify what might be that standard type of phrasing. A personalized rejection, on the other hand, is something that is actually exciting to get from a literary agent. I know a rejection sucks no matter which way you twist it, but all things considered, a personalized rejection is much more helpful and encouraging than a form rejection. It means that the agent has given you some indication of why they are not able to offer representation, and it typically means that they have really taken a serious look at your query and heavily considered it before sending along the rejection. Sometimes the feedback that they give and the constructive critique that they offer can actually help you revisit either your query letter or your sample pages to strengthen your next batch of queries. And I'm going to talk about how to do that. If you want a larger breakdown of all the different types of responses you might get from a literary agent, including a request to see the manuscript and what we call a revise and resubmit, Check out my other video on all the types of literary agent responses. I go through all of them in that one. This one, we're just gonna focus on rejections. So how do you tell the difference between a form rejection and a personalized rejection? To be honest, it can be very subtle. So that's why I'm going to help you decipher some of the phrasing that literary agents commonly use, so you can be on the lookout for it in your own responses. The first example is when an agent says something along the lines of, "It's not a fit for me." So let's highlight some examples of phrasing an agent might use when they're trying to indicate that you are not a match for their list or not a good fit for one reason or another. "Thank you so much for sharing your story, but unfortunately, it's just not the right fit for me or my list. I enjoyed reviewing your pages, but unfortunately, I'm not the right match to champion this." You'll see the term champion pretty frequently in agent responses, and that's because that's really what they see themselves as, the champion of your story, because they are the ones that have to present it to publishers, and in order to do that, they have to be passionate about it and truly, truly believe in its potential. So that's why you see phrasing like champion. So looking at these responses overall, they might have slightly varied phrasing, but the overarching sentiment is that you're not a match and you're not a fit. Notice here that the agent is not giving any particular feedback as to why that author is not a match or a fit for them. Because of that, I would generally consider this a form rejection, unless the agent does elaborate on why they say that you're not a good match or a good fit. I understand that this type of response can be disheartening because, of course, you queried that agent because you think that you were a good fit. You did your research, you made sure they represented your genre, and so it can be confusing or upsetting to see that they're saying you're not a good fit. But keep in mind that this is typically just formulaic response language that they use, and it's really not personal. So don't dwell on this type of response too much. Ultimately, there really isn't much you can do here because the agent isn't giving you any constructive feedback, and their reasoning is just, you're not a good fit. It's pretty vague. So these are the types of rejections that you just have to brush off and frankly try to forget about. The next type of rejection you might see is related to the agent saying, "I didn't connect." This is when agents refer to the story not particularly resonating with them or not feeling compelling for them. So here is some phrasing they might use. "Unfortunately, I am going to have to pass on this as I didn't connect with the story on a deep enough level." Or, "Thank you for sharing your work, but I didn't find myself as drawn into the story as I need to be to offer representation." So this type of rejection has a tad of personalization because the agent is giving you a reason for not moving forward. They're saying they didn't connect with the story, albeit that is a pretty vague reason. So I understand why this type of phrasing feels very cryptic to decipher. So I consider this a situation where the agent did read your sample pages, did consider the premise and the plot blurb that you outlined, but they just didn't get pulled into the story enough to want to read more. And maybe they just can't pinpoint why that is. Or maybe they simply don't have the time to parse out and write up why they didn't connect with the story if they can even identify the reason why. So again, I actually wouldn't really change anything if you get a response like this. It is slightly more personalized, but it doesn't give you any specific feedback. And frankly, there really isn't anything you can do if the agent or even a reader down the line doesn't connect with the story. Remember, this industry is a subjective one. That's the name of the game, and your story is not going to connect with everyone, and that is completely okay. Remember that it eventually is going to connect with the right readers and hopefully the right agent. So just keep your head up and stay optimistic. The third example is when an agent uses phrasing like, "Well, I liked X," and then goes on to explain something that they didn't like. This is the most common structure for a personalized rejection, where the agent describes what they enjoyed about the query letter or about the sample pages, and then explains why they ultimately did not offer representation, or what made them hesitate to move forward with you. This could look like the following examples. "Thank you so much for allowing me to read your pages. While your writing is strong, I couldn't quite understand the protagonist's motivations." Or, "I appreciate your patience as I reviewed your materials. While your premise is compelling, the narrator's voice felt a bit melodramatic." These are the types of rejections that I recommend paying the most attention to, because the latter portion can actually hold some insights that help you iterate on your query letter or on your sample pages. Now, it's possible that you don't agree with the constructive feedback that the agent gave you, which is totally fine. You don't have to listen to them. After all, you don't know this person and they don't want to work with you, so you do not have to listen to them if it doesn't feel right. However, especially if multiple agents are giving you similar personalized feedback like this, then I definitely recommend considering taking it to heart if it makes sense to do so. Something else to consider is that it is also possible that something that an agent calls out as being the reason why they didn't offer you representation is actually something that another agent or even a beta reader complimented you on. As I said, this is a subjective business, so take every piece of feedback with a grain of salt, and I always recommend only moving forward with the feedback that actually resonates with you and makes sense to you as the author and as the visionary of the story. So say that this feedback did actually make sense to you and you wanted to potentially revise your materials according to some feedback that you got from an agent. In the first case, the agent says they couldn't understand the protagonist's motivations. So within that first chapter or first 10-page excerpt that you send to the literary agent, make sure that you maybe add a little bit of exposition or a situation in which the protagonist is reflecting internally or telling someone else something that reveals their inner motivations, because that will then likely compel future agents to invest more emotionally in that character and connect with them, which is really, really critical in those opening pages. In the second case, the agent said that the premise was compelling, but the narrator's voice felt a bit melodramatic. So maybe there is a really high stakes or emotional or action driven situation in your opening scene, and the narrator is a first person narrator who is reacting quite exuberantly to it. Maybe there's a lot of exclamation points or all caps, and those could be signals to the agent that it's just a bit over the top, and you could potentially pretty easily tone that down and see if that results in different types of responses. When it comes to the personalized rejection, know that agents do not do this for all queries. And while I know it's still a huge bummer, while you can even be annoyed because maybe their feedback is not what you wanted to hear, or maybe you don't agree with it, just keep in mind that it does really mean they seriously considered your query and they did take the time to send you that note, and they do not do that for nearly all of the queries that they get. So it is encouraging from that perspective. So I hope these tips and going through these examples helps you identify what might be a form rejection versus a personalized rejection and how to handle them and think about them as you are embarking on the querying journey. I know it's a tough journey, so I want to help you through it as much as I can. Let me know in the comments if you've received any of these 3 types of rejections that I went over, or if you've received a different type of rejection, or if you even want to share the language that an agent has submitted to you. You can obviously take out their name. I'd love to see those examples in the comments, because I think it is really, really helpful for other writers to see how agents are responding so they know what's normal in their querying journey. This is a safe space for us to talk about the trials and tribulations of querying. I do have a video that goes over some reasons why agents might have rejected your query, so I recommend checking that out. They don't always give you that reason in the rejections as we went over today. So sometimes it can help to read between the lines and maybe just think about some potential reasons why agents might not be responding positively to your work. As I mentioned earlier, I do have the free story self-assessment link in the description below. It is a worksheet that will help you determine where your story is doing really well and how you might improve it to take it to the next level. So definitely check that out. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It helps me know you are finding this content useful and allows me to continue growing this amazing community. Thanks so much for watching, and happy querying.